Hi, my name is Neil Kelleher. In this video I'll be going over the one-legged standing forward bend. In this action, the free leg is lifted, the knee is forwards, and you keep the free leg lifted. You can work at keeping your spine long, and then from there slowly bend forward, keeping the knee forward. The idea of the exercise is to bend forward slowly and smoothly, and to stand up slowly and smoothly. If you can touch your hands to the floor, that's ideal, but if not, work towards it. And so when standing on one leg, keep the other knee lifted, slowly bend forward. See if you can control yourself as you descend, and then when you stand up, do the same thing slowly and smoothly, and then switch legs. So lift the other knee, bend forward. If you can, touch your hands, if you can, touch your hands to the floor and then stand up. One of the challenges I have in this pose is that standing on my right leg, it is fairly easy to bend forward and stand up. On my left leg, I had an injury where I damaged the inside of the knee a few years ago, and what I find, I believe that's the cause, what I find is bending forward on my left leg, particularly when I'm standing up, I get a feeling of tension in the back of the hip. And so my challenge is learning to do the pose in such a way that I don't get that tension. So my theory is that the problem with my left side is that the obturator internus isn't activating properly, and it perhaps doesn't have the space to activate. And what may be happening, so the obturator internus, it starts on the inside of the pelvis, passes around the back of the pelvis and reaches slightly upwards to attach to the thigh bone. So from the rear it looks like the muscle is going this way, and it attaches, or it passes around the pelvis just above the sitting bone. So from here it reaches up and attaches to the inside of the greater trochanter. And what may be happening for myself is that feeling of tension isn't necessarily the obturator internus, it might be the gemellus superior and or inferior, and those muscles have a similar path, or maybe the quadratus lumborum, which attaches, its fibers sort of reach downwards to attach to the back of the thigh. Whichever it is causing some sort of pain in the back of my hip when I stand up. And so when I bend forward, particularly on my left leg, my goal or my intention, what I'm trying to do is create enough space at the back of the hip socket between the sitting bone and the back of the thigh bone, so that obturator internus has enough room to contract effectively. And one of the ways that I work on deliberately activating obturator internus is once I've turned my hip slightly towards my standing leg and keep it in that orientation, I then work at trying to spread the sitting bone, move the sitting bone away from the tailbone, and then I try and keep that feeling while I bend forward. And you can read a little bit more. So here's a picture of the obturator internus, or here's a couple of pictures, and you can see the way it attaches to the inside of the pelvis and then passes through the lesser sciatic notch and then attaches to the inside of the greater trochanter. And I believe that because it has it attaches to a large surface area within the pelvis, that gives it quite a bit of stability, or a big foundation from which to pull the sitting bone outwards. So why is that important? So the obturator internus passes around the back of the pelvis, and when active, it may, with respect to a stable thigh bone, it may pull the sitting bone outwards, and actually pulls the sitting bone away from the sacrum, just a slight amount. And attaching between the sitting bone and the sacrum is a ligament called the sacrotuberous ligament. And my theory is that by activating the obturator internus, it adds tension to the sacrotuberous ligament. And that's important because there are some fibers of the gluteus maximus that attach to the sacrotuberous ligament. So right about there, and from there they attach to the back of the thigh bone. So with the sacrotuberous ligament tight, or with some tension on it, those fibers of the gluteus maximus, this muscle here, then have a firm foundation from which to act on the thigh bone. Why is that important? Not only then can those muscles, those fibers be used to pull the body upright, but they can also control the descent of the body while bending forward. So one of the reasons that I like to do this pose as opposed to this pose is with the leg forward, the center of gravity is more in front of the leg. That means the back of the leg has to do more work while bending forward. You'll be able to feel that when standing back upright. You may feel the back of the thigh tensing and the buttock. And so I feel when I can do this effectively, poses like bending forward in this may be easier, and it may lead to an increase in flexibility or perceived flexibility because you know these hip muscles are strong. You can create the same feeling in the hip joint while bending forward in this pose, like the feeling in bending forward in this pose. So rather than relaxing the legs, because you're standing on both legs, you can work at keeping the hip joint stable, using this hip to control the descent of your body forwards. And because this hip has stability and control, you may find that you can go further forwards. But also in a standing forward bend like this, which is one of the first actions in the sun salutation, or just even bending forward from standing, if you spread both sitting bones so that your obturator internus activates, so that adds tension to the sacrotuberous ligament, which in turn gives the gluteus maximus a firm foundation, you may find that even bending forward like this, and you can do it with the knees bent if you like, or with the knees straight, but if you spread the sitting bones and lift them so that the pelvis tilts forward, you may find that you can bend further forward because the hips, because you're controlling the hip muscles, and then you can stand back up. Now I still have a little bit of tenderness or pain in the left hip, so I still have some work to do. But I believe the theory is sound, but rather than waiting for me, you can take my word for it, you can try it out for yourself. So when doing this exercise as a prelude, you may find it easier to start with the feet slightly turned out and the knees bent. But anyway, as a prelude, you can do the side-to-side weight shifting exercise so that you get used to feeling controlling your feet. And then when you do stand on one leg, one foot preparatory to bending forward, you can have the intention of keeping your standing foot, so in this case my right foot, absolutely still while bending forward, and then bend forward slowly and smoothly. And you can keep your work at keeping your spine long, but I don't think that's quite as crucial in this pose, at least not in the very beginning. So as you keep your foot still, notice your knee, like mine tends to want to collapse inwards as I bend forward. So I have to work keeping my foot active so that my shin and knee keeps pointing straight forwards while I bend forward. And then if I do choose to touch my hands to the floor, rather than using my arms to support my body and keep me balanced so that my leg can relax, I keep my leg active and my arms relaxed. I just touch them to the floor. Then that means because my leg's active, it's fairly easy just to take my hands off of the floor without any of this lurching forwards when I take the hands off of the floor. So let's try this on the other side then. So knee forward, spine long. Work at keeping your standing foot still. And you can see mine has a little bit of movement. And then from there, work at keeping your shin and knee in the same orientation. So prevent your knee from collapsing inwards, but also don't go too far the other way so that the inside of your foot lifts off of the floor, particularly the base of the big toe. So with the lifted knee lifted and pointing straight ahead, slowly bend forward. Try and keep your foot still, keep the knee pointing straight ahead, and then keep this knee reaching forward rather than back. Again, if you touch the floor, keep your arms relaxed, and then slowly stand up. And then switch legs, do it the other side, and repeat a few times. I'd say max 3 to 5 times each. So if you do have problems in this pose, my own work, and this may or may not apply to you, is getting the orientation of the pelvis correct. So for my left leg, I find I have to tilt my pelvis actually towards the standing leg. So if I tilt my pelvis towards the standing leg, this creates space between the sitting bone, between this sitting bone and the back of the thigh, like so. Then from there I keep that orientation, and then I work, without the pelvis moving, I change the shape of the pelvis and I work on pulling the sitting bone towards the thigh bone. And if you're not quite sure what that means, you could try standing on both legs, feel both your sitting bones, and imagine the sitting bones pulling out towards the thigh and slightly upwards. While doing that, imagine you can feel your thigh bones, keep your thigh bones absolutely still. So rather than letting them collapse inwards, that was a deliberate movement, try to keep the thigh bones still and move the sitting bones out and up relative to the top of it. So then once you have the feeling, you can try to get the same feeling in triangle forward fold or Parsvottanasana. You can have your arms free to start with, then try the same pose with the hands in reverse prayer if you like. But while standing on both legs, you might need to turn the pelvis slightly towards your front leg. So this could be the equivalent of the standing leg, so that the sitting bone moves away from the thigh bone. So the sitting bone moves away from the thigh bone, so you create space at the back of the hip. Then try and activate obturator internus by pulling the sitting bone towards the thigh bone without changing the orientation of your pelvis. Then keep the feeling, keep your spine long, slowly bend forward. You can reach your hands down your leg as you do so. Touch the floor if you can. Hold for a few breaths and then stand up the same way, keeping the leg straight, using the strength of the hip. You can also try the same thing in standing forward bend with the legs about hip width apart. Now for this one, you don't want to turn the pelvis one way or the other towards either of the legs because it's a symmetrical pose, but you can still try keeping the thighs stable, spreading the sitting bones. You might get a feeling that the sitting bones are lifting slightly as you do so. Keep the thighs stable, spread the sitting bones, keep that feeling. Do it with knees straight or slightly bent to begin with. So do it slightly bent to begin with and then work it straighten them. Keep the feeling of the sitting bones being spread apart. Keep the spine long. If you like, touch your hands to the floor. If you can't do that, touch your hands to the leg. And then keep the same feeling in the hip joints as you stand up. And hopefully that will help improve your forward bend. Give it a little bit of time and practice, but if nothing else, it improves your hip stability and your hip awareness. Thank you very much.